My only son cleaned out my life savings and flew across the ocean with his wife and her mother, while I was left with nothing but a cold house and a broken heart. I did not shed a single tear when the bank teller told me the balance was zero, because I knew that my silence would be the loudest thing he ever heard. I had spent 40 years scrubbing floors to build that mountain of security, only to watch my own blood try to push me off the peak. Before I go any further, let me say something honest. If this opening hit you in any way, subscribe to Voices of Emily so you stay here with me for the rest of this story. I am putting a part of myself into these words, and I want you to walk through it with me. And when you can leave a comment telling me what this moment reminded you of. Your voice matters here. Then tap the like button so this story reaches someone who might need it more than we know. I remember the way the sun used to hit the linoleum in my kitchen back, when Darius was just a little boy with dirt on his knees and a laugh that could heal the world. Those were the days when I thought I was building a future that no one could ever tear down. I spent 40 years on my hands and knees, scrubbing the marble floors of the wealthy folks up in the Savannah Hills, just so my boy could have a life that did not smell like bleach and lemon oil. I thought I was sowing seeds of love and respect, but it turns out I was just fattening a calf that would one day turn around and bite the hand that fed him. Do you ever wonder if the sacrifices we make as mothers are even seen by the children we make them for? That Tuesday morning started out like any other, with the smell of chicory coffee and the sound of the mourning doves calling from the oak tree in the yard. I sat down in my favorite velvet armchair, the one I bought with my very first paycheck from the manor house, and I picked up my telephone to check on my little nest egg. I had been saving for a rain day, or maybe just for the day when my bones finally decided they had enough of working. But when I looked at that screen, the numbers did not make sense. It said 0. Not a penny left. My heart did not just skip a beat. It felt like it fell right through the floorboards. I called the bank, my fingers shaking so hard I could barely press the buttons on the glass. The man on the other end sounded like he was reading from a script, cold and distant, telling me that a wire transfer had been made for $85,000. Every cent I had to my name was gone. When I asked where it went, he told me the name I loved more than life itself, Darius Jenkins. I hung up that phone and the silence in my house became a heavy thing, pressing down on my chest until I could hardly breathe. Why is it that the people we carry in our hearts are the ones who know exactly where to strike to cause the most pain? It was then that the telephone rang again, and it was Sister Mary from down the street, her voice full of a kind of excitement that felt like salt in an open wound. She asked me if I had seen the pictures Darius was posting on the internet. I did not have much use for those social media websites, but I opened up the app and there he was. My son was standing in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, wearing a silk shirt that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. He was holding Chantel, his wife, and that mother of hers, Mrs. Gable, was standing there with a designer handbag and a grin that told me she knew exactly where that money came from. They were eating at a table covered in white linen, drinking wine that looked like melted gold, while I was sitting in a house that was suddenly far too quiet. Chantel had written a caption that said, "Living our best life because we earned it. Thank you, family legacy." And she added a little emoji of a bag of money. I felt a heat rise up in my neck, a slow burn that was not quite anger but something much older and deeper. The very place where you were most broken? I picked up my old notebook, and I wrote down one name, Clarence. He was the only one who could help me turn this betrayal into a lesson that Darius would never forget. I knew the law better than my son thought I did. And I knew that Chantel had left a trail of breadcrumbs that would lead them both right into the trap I was about to set. I was not just a mother anymore. I was a woman who had been erased, and I was about to write my name back into the story in permanent ink. Clarence had been my friend since we were children. A man who had seen the inside of more courtrooms than I had seen kitchens. When he came over that night, his face was a mask of concern as he looked at the bank statements I had printed out. He told me that Darius had used a joint account that I did not even remember signing for. Then he showed me something that made the blood in my veins turn to ice. There was a document, a will, with my name at the top and a signature at the bottom that looked like mine, but the loops in the letters were all wrong. My son had tried to sign away my house while I was still living in it. Hattie Mae, Clarence said, his voice low and heavy. This is not just about a vacation. They were planning for a world where you are not around to ask questions. I looked at that forged signature, and I felt a chill that no blanket could warm. My own child was waiting for me to die, so he could finish what he started. It is a terrible thing to realize that the person you would lay down your life for is the person who is counting the days until you are gone. How do you find the words to describe the moment your heart finally admits it has been lied to for years? I remembered the time Darius was 6 and he had a fever that would not break. I stayed up for 3 nights straight, sponging his forehead with cool water, and praying to the good Lord to take me instead of him. The very place where you were most broken? I picked up my old notebook, and I wrote down one name, Clarence. He was the only one who could help me turn this betrayal into a lesson that Darius would never forget. I knew the law better than my son thought I did. And I knew that Chantel had left a trail of breadcrumbs that would lead them both right into the trap I was about to set. I was not just a mother anymore. I was a woman who had been erased, and I was about to write my name back into the story in permanent ink. Clarence had been my friend since we were children. A man who had seen the inside of more courtrooms than I had seen kitchens. When he came over that night, his face was a mask of concern as he looked at the bank statements I had printed out. He told me that Darius had used a joint account that I did not even remember signing for. Then he showed me something that made the blood in my veins turn to ice. There was a document, a will, with my name at the top and a signature at the bottom that looked like mine, but the loops in the letters were all wrong. My son had tried to sign away my house while I was still living in it. Hattie Mae, Clarence said, his voice low and heavy. This is not just about a vacation. They were planning for a world where you are not around to ask questions. I looked at that forged signature, and I felt a chill that no blanket could warm. My own child was waiting for me to die, so he could finish what he started. It is a terrible thing to realize that the person you would lay down your life for is the person who is counting the days until you are gone. How do you find the words to describe the moment your heart finally admits it has been lied to for years? I remembered the time Darius was 6 and he had a fever that would not break. I stayed up for 3 nights straight, sponging his forehead with cool water, and praying to the good Lord to take me instead of him. I would have given him my last breath back then. And I suppose I had been giving it to him ever since, piece by piece. I gave him the engagement ring from my marriage. The only thing of value I kept, just so he could buy a ring for Chantel that she thought was good enough. I gave him the down payment for his car. I gave and I gave until I was empty, and still, he wanted the jar the milk came in. But the reveals were not over yet. A few days later, I went to see my doctor because a tiredness had settled into my bones that sleep could not fix. Dr. Miller sat me down and told me that my blood was not doing what it was supposed to do. He used a big word, leukemia. And he told me that I needed to start treatment right away. I sat there in that sterile room, and I did not feel afraid. I felt a strange kind of clarity. I had a deadline now, and I was going to make sure that every minute I had left was used to set things right. What would you do if you knew your time was short and your legacy was being stolen by the very person you loved most? I did not tell Darius about the sickness. I did not want his pity, and I certainly did not want Chantel and her mother to start picking out the curtains for my house while I was still breathing. Instead, I worked with Clarence in the shadows. We found out that the money they took was sitting in a temporary account, waiting to be moved to a bank in Paris, where I could never touch it. They thought they were being clever, but they did not know that I had been watching Miss Pearl, my neighbor the accountant, and she had taught me more about numbers than Darius ever learned in that expensive college I paid for. Miss Pearl sat at my kitchen table with her spectacles perched on her nose, her fingers flying across a laptop keyboard. She showed me how to flag the transactions as fraudulent. Since the account was technically joint, and the signature was a forgery, we could freeze everything before they spent another dime. I watched as she clicked a button that would turn my son's dream vacation into a nightmare. I felt a pang of sadness for the boy he used to be. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who thought his mother was an ATM with a pulse. Is it possible to love the child but despise the man he became? While they were sipping champagne on a boat on the River Seine, I was sitting in my quiet house, drinking chamomile tea and preparing for the storm. I started to pack up the things in the house that truly mattered. The old Bible, the family photos, the handmade quilts. I was not going to let them have the memories along with the money. I realized then that Chantel and Mrs. Gable had been whispering in Darius's ear for years, telling him that I was a burden, that I was old-fashioned, and that he owed them the life they wanted. They had turned my son into a stranger who shared my last name. I thought back to the time Chantel first came to dinner. She had looked at my plastic-covered sofa and my collection of ceramic roosters, and she had laughed, a little tinkling sound that felt like a slap. She told me that I should update my life, and when I told her I liked my things just the way they were, she exchanged a look with Darius that said I was a lost cause. From that day on, the phone calls grew shorter and the visits grew rarer. I was being phased out of my own son's life like an old piece of machinery that was no longer efficient. Have you ever felt like a guest in your own child's heart? The pressure in my chest was not just from the sickness. It was from the weight of all the things I had not said over the years. I had stayed silent when they ignored me at the wedding. I had stayed silent when they forgot my birthday. I had stayed silent when Darius started talking like a man who had never known what it was like to be hungry. But my silence was over now. I was going to speak through the actions I took, and my voice was going to be heard all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. The trap was set, and all I had to do was wait for the sun to rise in Paris. Just as I was about to close my eyes that night, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a picture of a diamond necklace that Darius had bought for Chantel using my money. He had posted it with the words, "Only the best for my queen." I looked at that necklace and I knew that by tomorrow morning, that queen was going to find out that her crown was made of nothing but stolen glass. I was ready to take back my life, even if it was the last thing I ever did. Keycap 2 midpoint CTA. Let me pause for just a second. This part of the story is where things start to get heavier, and I want you to stay with me for it. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now. It keeps you close while I take you through the rest of this. And if something in this stirred a memory in you, tell me in the comments. After that, press like so this story does not disappear into the feed. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon in Savannah when my phone started to ring. I knew before I even looked at the screen who it was. The caller ID said Darius, and I could almost feel the panic radiating through the airwaves. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. I wanted him to feel the same uncertainty I felt when I saw that zero in my bank account. I wanted him to understand that the foundation he thought was so solid was actually made of sand that I was letting slip through my fingers. How many times have we answered the call only to be disappointed by the voice on the other end? When I finally answered on the 10th call, his voice was not the confident one I had heard in his social media videos. He was sobbing, a jagged, ugly sound that reminded me of when he was a boy and he had fallen off his bicycle. "Mom, what did you do?" he cried out. "The hotel says the card is declined. They are threatening to call the police. Chantel is screaming at me and her mother is packing her bags. Why did you block the money?" I told him that I did not have much time, and that I was spending my remaining days surrounded by people who loved Hattie Mae, not people who loved Hattie Mae's bank account. I told him that Chantel and her mother were the consequences of the choices he made. and that he was welcome to live in the house as long as he paid the taxes and kept the roses alive. But I told him that the door to my heart was locked, and I was not sure if I had the strength left to find the key. Is it ever too late to ask for forgiveness when the person you hurt is already fading away? Clarence told me that Darius spent the first week sitting on the porch, crying until his eyes were red. Chantel had left him the moment they got back to the States, taking her mother and moving in with some other man who had a car she liked. Darius was alone in that big house, surrounded by the ghosts of the sacrifices I had made for him. He started coming to the hospital every day, sitting in the waiting room even though I told the nurses I did not want any visitors. He would send in little notes, written on the back of receipts or scraps of paper, telling me he was sorry. He told me he had started working a job at a warehouse, doing the kind of hard labor he used to look down on. He said his hands were blistered and his back ached, and for the first time, he understood why I always had a bottle of liniment on my nightstand. I watched him through the small window in my room, seeing him age 10 years in a single month. He was finally learning what it meant to be a man, but it was a lesson that was being written in the ink of regret. Does pain always have to be the teacher that finally makes us listen? One afternoon, when the sun was casting long shadows through the hospital blinds, I let him come in. He looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders slumped and his eyes hollow. He did not say anything at first. He just walked over to my bed and took my hand, his rough palms feeling like a memory of my own. He put his head on my shoulder and he wept, not like a man losing a fortune, but like a boy who had lost his way home. I did not pull away. I am a mother, after all, and even a broken heart still knows how to beat for its child. I did not mean to kill you, Mama, he whispered, his voice cracked and raw. I looked at him, and I saw the reflection of all the prayers I had ever said for him. I told him that I was not dead yet, and that if he wanted to honor me, he would spend the rest of his life being the man I raised him to be, not the man Chantel wanted him to be. I told him that forgiveness is a long road, and we were only at the first mile marker. But I did let him stay. I let him hold my hand while I drifted off to sleep. The sound of his breathing the only melody I needed. The days that followed were quiet. Darius took care of the house, and he took care of me. He learned how to cook the pot roast just the way I liked it, and he spent his weekends weeding the garden until the roses were the envy of the whole block. He never spoke of Paris, and he never spoke of the money. It was as if that part of his life had been a fever dream that finally broke. We did not have the fortune we used to have, but we had a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and a living room where the silence was no longer heavy, but peaceful. I am still here, writing these words while the sun sets over the savanna trees. The doctors say I am responding to the treatment better than they expected, perhaps because my soul is finally at rest. Darius is in the kitchen now, washing the dishes and humming a song I used to sing to him. He found himself in the ruins of the life he tried to build on lies. Sometimes, you have to let everything burn down just so you can see what is worth saving from the ashes. Do you believe that a second chance is a gift from God, or something we have to earn with our own tears? Before I close this story, let me say this. Telling stories like this takes something out of me. And if you found any meaning in it, subscribe to Voices of Emily, so we stay connected for the next one. Then share a comment with your thoughts or your experience. I read every one because your perspective matters more than you think. And if this story left an imprint on you, tap the like button so it reaches someone who might be walking through their own version of it tonight. I look at my son now, and I do not see the man who robbed me. I see a man who understands that the most valuable thing he ever had was the mother he almost threw away. I have my house, I have my dignity, and I have the peace of knowing that I am no longer invisible. My revenge was not in the blocking of the money. It was in the reclaiming of my son's soul. And that, my friends, is a wealth that no bank account could ever hold. Stay strong, and never let anyone tell you that your silence is a sign of weakness. My silence was not a surrender. It was a strategy for my soul.